Before further proceedings, may I request Professor V. N. Atri to felicitate the Vice Admiral Pradeep Chauhan, DG, National Maritime Foundation, New Delhi. Please, sir.
Thank you so much.
Our next speaker, Ambassador Rajiv Kumar Bhatia, IFS, ME, Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India. He served as India's ambassador to Myanmar and Mexico and has held key roles in foreign policy research. He has authored 3 books on India's global relations and chair FICCI's task force on blue economy. Please welcome, sir.
Good afternoon, dear friends. It's a pleasure to be here today, and especially among veterans of our domain. We have Vice President of South Asian University, Professor Chaturvedi, 2 of my colleagues from the Indian Foreign Service, Anup and Sanjay, 2 veterans from the Navy, Admiral Chauhan and Admiral Chawla, and of course 2 great professors, Professor Atri and Professor Mohanty. And we also have a sprinkling of students here, and I hope we can hold them back until at least the end of the session. When I speak about the oceanic matters south of the Vindhya, then I know that a vast majority of my audience have seen the ocean. But when I speak to the audience north of the Vindhya, I am not even sure whether all of us have seen the ocean. But no matter what we have done, I think I want to address the students, and I want to say that you have in this hall the experts who have spent a lifetime studying oceanic matters, and therefore the outcome of this conference will be of great importance to all of us. Now let me first make a provocative proposition, and the proposition is that from about the turn of the last century till about the end of the first decade of this century, India, the strategic community, was solely focused on the Indian Ocean. I remember very well, in the wake of the establishment of Iora, how much of intellectual discourse centered around the Indian Ocean and its problems and prospects. And this culminated in India's chairship of Iora, which you know ran from 2011 to 2013. That was around the time when India got seduced by the Indo-Pacific construct. And then we ran with it. For the next decade, we made such a huge song and dance about the Indo-Pacific that we almost forgot the Indian Ocean. In fact, many experts thought that the word Indo stands not for the Indian Ocean but India. And this was particularly exacerbated by the American definition of Indo-Pacific, which was, to use a technical jargon, Asia Pacific plus India, which was a big difference between Indian definition and the American definition. And the next 1 decade, we were so concerned about South Pacific nations, East China Sea, Sea of Japan, Taiwan. We've completely forgot that the shores which are watered by the Indian Ocean around Sri Lanka, Maldives, Myanmar, Bangladesh, Mauritius, Seychelles, they are much more important than the Sea of Japan. So in a way, what Kurukshetra University is doing now is to find a rebalancing, and I think this opportunity which is now coming up for the chairmanship of Iora once again by India is really an opportunity not to forget Indo-Pacific but to put central focus on the Indian Ocean as part of the Indo-Pacific. Now, ever since I led the Indian Council of World Affairs, I've tried to follow one basic mantra, which is that the organizers of the conference work very hard to produce the concept note. So it's a good idea for panelists and also the members of the audience to read the concept note carefully and ask yourself as to what exactly the organizers want. And in this case, Professor Atri made it very clear that he was not interested in a long history or the analysis or facts and figures about Iora. All that you have to do is spend 5 minutes on Wikipedia, you can get all the facts and figures. You don't have to drive 6 hours to Kurukshetra to learn about it. What Professor Atri and the organizers are interested in, can we help the government with some ideas as it begins to prepare for the chairmanship of Iora? Can we make this organization more effective, more consequential, more result oriented, more aligned to its original goals as to how it can help the region? And if India is not going to give that chunk of ideation with respect, probably nobody else can. And since in North India, we have come to Kurukshetra to discuss the Indian Ocean, even out of the national capital, it's only proper that we meet this challenge. So I've cut out all the details about Indian Ocean, Iora, Indo-Pacific, the rest of it. I'm just going to present in the next 6-7 minutes my 8-point package or mantra as to how India and the other 35 members and dialogue partners, 23 plus 12, must work together to turn this into the kind of institution that President Mandela and the Indian leadership had envisaged. We all know that we have achieved something, but we have not achieved everything. Can we at least achieve more? So here it goes. My first point is, India must follow Indonesia's example and hold the second Iora summit during its chairship. In this day and age, no plurilateral grouping can succeed without the ultimate political will, which is embodied only when the heads of the state and heads of government meet and ponder and reflect the consensus that binds them and that directs their ministers and their officials to deliver on the vision that the leaders have. If there is no summit, Iora will remain a routine, low-key organization. No amount of conferencing, no amount of ideation is going to achieve very much. My second point is, it is a very badly strapped organization when it comes to money. You heard again and again that India contributes $1 million to the special fund. $1 million? you are going to need $5 million to get the golden visa to the US. What are we talking about? Now, it is not for private think tanks and independent experts to suggest whether Indian government should pay 5 or 10 or 50 million dollars. All that I am saying is India should come forward with serious seed money, and India should work hard with all member states and the dialogue partners to say, please match your words with action, with money. So if we work together, who knows, maybe 100 or even 200 million dollars is not asking for the sky. Just look at the membership, just look at the dialogue partnerships. Unless until this institution has serious money, it will remain a low-key organization. My third point, of the 8 areas, all of them are important, I agree. We keep pushing them. But 2 are of paramount importance. They are the 2 pillars of the good governance in the Indian Ocean, and they are maritime security and blue economy. I think if you can agree to this, then what I am suggesting is that there should be 2 major conferences, one on maritime security and the other on blue economy, hosted by India as the chair of Iora, and this is where our brothers from the Navy and our professors from the academia and all of us can work together to ensure the optimal success of these conferences. Then I think we should look at what Professor Atri said in the morning. We are preparing the next generation. We are passing on a little bit of our enthusiasm and excitement about the possibilities in the Indian Ocean. So I think we should suggest that a series of lectures by eminent people should be arranged in various Iora universities around the world, not just in India, but if we have 35 members, one way or the other, dialogue partners included, we pick up 10 or 15 eminent universities, we collect a group of experts from different countries, give them different topics, and address not just 25, 30 people, but 100, 200, 500 people to carry forward the idea that we are a large intellectual family, we have common problems, and 21st century is going to be our century. My next point, I think it's time now to rejuvenate the academic forum. Academic forum has done a lot in the past, but I think it is stagnant. I think I would suggest that 2 of our premier think tanks, ICWA and RIS, can collaborate to create a new network of think tanks in Iora, of the kind they had done for Africa. I think the time has come to rejuvenate and re-energize the think tank network here. I think this is very, very important. My next point, in the same token, in the same tone, think tanks and universities are important, but you cannot ignore the media organizations today. If you have a message that Indian Ocean is a sea of opportunities, you have to involve the media editors and prominent journalists. So a conference of media representatives from the Iora world needs to be arranged. It doesn't have to be done in India, it can be done elsewhere, maybe Mauritius, maybe France, maybe Australia, because I'm not suggesting that everything is to be done by India. So we can find a possible host, and then this can also be done. My next point, we must try to establish an alliance of coastal communities in the Iora world. this business of talking about oceanic matters by excluding people who live in the coastal regions is a self-defeating exercise. The more I go to South India, the more I talk in places like Kochi and Chennai and so on, I find their perspective is different because they live on the coast. They live by the sea, unlike us. Therefore, an alliance of coastal communities to promote the fundamental philosophy would be a very good idea. And finally, dear friends, often critics point out that Iora is a talk shop and that it does not do projects. This is not true. Actually, Iora does projects. What Iora fails to do is to let the world know more about the project. So I would suggest that on the operational plan, we put the idea that Iora will develop a new detailed publication on the projects it has done in the last 5 years or 10 years, the bigger projects, or the project that it plans to do, so that Iora can be better projected to our targets, so the media, the universities, the governments, the think tanks, and above all, the business community. The more business and industry would know about this institution, the more support they will be able to extend to it. In the end, let me report to you, the other day in Kochi, I had a brief conversation with a former Navy Chief of India, and I asked him whether it is true that in the last 10 years we forgot about the Indian Ocean and we started talking too much about the Indo-Pacific or Pacific Ocean. He said that this is in the minds of the think tanks and media and people outside the government. He stressed that within the government, nobody has forgotten about the Indian Ocean. So I feel very encouraged by this observation, and I can say that while our Indo-Pacific construct must continue for the larger geopolitical compulsions, our real interest, our central focus on Indian Ocean, both from the point of security and economic development, must continue, and that requires a very much stronger Iora than we have today. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, sir. Our next speaker, Ambassador Anup Mudgal, a retired IFS officer, High Commissioner of India to Mauritius. With 32 years of experience, he has served in various capacities related to maritime security and trade policy, and he frequently advises on global economic affairs. Please welcome, sir.
In fact, after listening to the previous two speakers, I'm left with nothing to contribute. So, okay, let me see, can I still be relevant? Sir, after your presentation, for somebody like me to be relevant is not easy. We spoke about the various verticals relating to blue economy and the ocean affairs. But I thought, let me take you to more horizontal concept in the Iora, which led to, sir, our thinking on lines of saga. I was there very much when this whole thing was evolving, and there was a great pull and push. What is more important? Whether the maritime security was more important, or the economy was more important, or the conservation was more important. We knew the ocean, in fact, has all three pillars, extremely important to its relevance to humanity. So as a result, security and growth for all essentially brought in the economy part, which Professor Mohanty really covered very extensively, and I totally agree with him. Without the oceans, the future growth of humanity would not be possible. Mr. Bhatia sir, we have been talking about this as part of our task force. Over the entire human history, if we added till date about $110 trillion to the global economy, we are planning to do another $110 trillion in the next 24-25 years. And with the current status, what we have done to the environment, over the entire human history, it really scares me a lot what we can do if we have to achieve the same addition in the next 25 years. So, all three pillars, how we balance them is absolutely essential. Economy, as I said, has already been spoken, but Professor Mohanty largely concentrated on the tangible part of the benefits. But if you ask me, for me, the intangible contribution of the ocean is, if not more, at least as important as the tangible. The last time I spoke here, I mentioned about the intangible. Intangibles in terms of the oxygen, in terms of the carbon sink, in terms of the climatic stabilization. Believe me, in fact, we all talk about climate change, but at the heart of anything which will help us maintain climate stability are the oceans. If we ignore the ocean health, believe me, there is absolutely no other pathway available to us for climate stabilization. So, the intangible, which we don't see, so there again, Professor Mohanty, a bit of a balance between the tangible and the intangible, and then how this whole process goes on within the ocean, do we understand it? Sir, you listed those very useful pathways. I personally feel, sir, Iora needs to develop competence in R&D relating to ocean affairs. When I say R&D, I mean, sir, we have to dig deeper into the water. Because when it comes to the ocean health is impacted by what's happening underwater, not what's happening over water. Its implications are seen over water. So therefore, we didn't have tools to dig deep into the ocean and understand what was happening underwater. But thank God today, we have these tools available to us where we can see the consequences of our action in the ocean almost in real time. Now, if we are able to deploy those resources for understanding the implications of our action in the ocean, then it can help us understand the domain, as Professor Mohanty mentioned about MSP, which is marine domain, marine spatial planning. Now, in marine spatial planning, we look at two types of conflicts: the intersectoral conflicts and humanity versus the ocean conflict. Now, how do we manage that? These are important conflicts. If we don't manage those conflicts, I'm sure we cannot guarantee ocean health. And if we can't guarantee ocean health, we cannot guarantee many other things in terms of sustainability. So I think Iora, sir, has to develop its own capacity in R&D related to ocean affairs. So that is with regard to the tangible, intangible and the sustainability aspect. Coming to the security aspect, Mr. Bhatia sir, I'm sure I don't have to really tell you this, But when we were talking about Sagar, what we had back of our mind was that a lot of the security in the ocean affair will be a function of the regional goodwill. If we are not able to generate that horizontal goodwill, we will always be worried that somebody else may be doing something to disrupt what we want to do. And that, unfortunately, that experience we had from the very beginning of independent status. Sir, I'm sure you will agree with me when we started offering to the Global South. And Global South predominantly in the Iora region, right? When we started offering to Global South, all right, we are also a developing country. We are also part of Global South. We are also poor. We are also illiterate. We are also underdeveloped. But different members of Global South have different levels of development and capabilities. And as a result, we offer to them, if you think we have a capability, we are willing to share with you. And that spirit, which started right in the beginning of India's independence, continued, and we clearly stated that when we said something. There's security and growth for all, which means if there is a capability that we have, and I'm sure previous speakers would have listed what kind of capabilities we have offered to other developing countries in terms of capacity building, in terms of capacity enhancement, in capacity sharing, all kinds of first responders, net security provider, you name it, is a long list, right? Then going into scholarships and fellowships and the ITech program, then our DPA, which is very expensive. Why we are doing it? We want to send a signal to the world that it is better to grow with rather than grow at the expense of somebody else. It's an inclusive approach. Sagar is an inclusive approach, and I think in Iora we need to really emphasize this thing with much greater vigor. Because my worry is that while we are very committed to the inclusivity of Sagar, but many members do not fully understand or appreciate that. Other than those with whom we are bilaterally doing a lot of stuff in terms of capacity building, in terms of capacity enhancement. So, sir, with this, I think I would not really take more of your time because I think we need to go back to our spirit, because we very often say Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the world is a family. But I think we need to demonstrate that with greater depth, and that is where Sagar is part of the same thing, that world is a family, and we are willing to share what we have. I think that is what we can do, right? We can't really go and twist people to say, do what we want you to do. We can tell them, all right, look at us, if you think we have something which we can offer to you or share with you, enhance your capability, we are willing to do it. And that, unless we do that in Iora, Professor, you were there when I was in Mauritius, and that is where, in fact, we didn't have clear instructions how to carry this message forward to the other members. Because no new offer will come without an expense to us. Are we willing to take that expense or not? That is important. And that expense would not only be in terms of monetary value, but also in terms of our own commitment to our own policies. So again, sir, with you here, I won't really venture into those details. I think we need to really, we are the largest. Indian Ocean is known by our name. We have to prove it to the world that really we mean it. We are the largest littoral country with probably amongst the largest capacities. Yes. And we have to ensure every member that we are with you, right? And we are not going to work against you. So with these words I stop. Thank you very much. I hope I made some sense.
He has influenced maritime strategy and play a key role in operational efforts like operational web. Currently, he Please welcome, sir.
Professor Atri, Ambassador Bhatia, Andrew Chauhan, Professor Panda, Professor Chaturvedi, Professor Mohanty. I think that comprises most of the audience, the people that I mentioned, but I think it's a very knowledgeable audience. I have been extremely educated myself over the past couple of hours by the information and the distinguished knowledge and insights of people who have dealt with Iora at length. And I totally agree, concur with Ambassador Bhatia that we need to stick to the point. And so I was asked to concentrate by Professor Atri on China's efforts in the Indian Ocean reform of the Indian Ocean Forum and what that really signifies or what that should signify to us. So before I get to that, I would also like to address the point regarding the Indo-Pacific, very relevant point which was raised by Ambassador Bhatia, that did we forget the Indian Ocean? And I think I fully concur with whoso you discussed, the former naval chief or officer that you mentioned, that the Indian Navy certainly did not, and I don't think it has really been. Now, what the aim was, to my mind, was that to use the Indo-Pacific to advance our interest in the Indian Ocean. Because one way of looking at the Indo-Pacific is that the US wanted to de-emphasize the importance of Asia-Pacific, which was land-focused after the Cold War, and get back to the ocean focus with the principal aim of trying to contain the rise of China. Now, China's rise in the maritime sphere is a reality today. It is number one in almost every field, maybe number two in one, but in almost every maritime field of endeavor. You can start from the size of the Navy, to the size of the Coast Guard, to the size of the fishing fleet, to the size of the merchant marine, to the amount of money spent in R&D, to the investments being done in the Arctic and the Antarctic, etc., etc. You will find that it is the largest and growing at a phenomenal pace. In fact, just to quote one example, the entire shipbuilding industry, this year 63% of the orders are with Chinese shipbuilders, and the pending orders, if you include them, close to 75% of ships that are being built in the world currently are in China. And the entire shipbuilding industry, if you add Japan and South Korea to it, the rest of the world comprises less than about 5.5% of shipbuilding, and India itself is less than 0.1%. So this shows the kind of skew that is going on. So the aim was to use this as a method, because being one of the bookends of the Indo-Pacific region, if you can put it that way. So I think we need to use the Indo-Pacific to that extent. And if we see the current geopolitical developments that are happening, which we are all following, which is a huge flux, the net gainer in a sense could be China. I mean, there is still speculation, but if the US isolationism persists, already it is giving more space to China in particular to expand as the US contracts in its thinking, at least for the current administration, at least for the current year. And the advantage that we are seeing for ourselves from the current geopolitical development is the willingness of the Trump administration to give more space to India in the Indian Ocean region, South Asia in particular, but the Indian Ocean in general. If you see his famous remark, somebody asked him about Bangladesh, and he said, well, that we should leave that to India. So, these are developments that, and hence I think we should pick up and use the Indo-Pacific to advance our leadership in the Indian Ocean region, which has been there for some time, but which correctly needs to be invigorated. China's Indian Ocean Forum, how do we look at it? It's very interesting. There are various approaches that you can look at it, but I think it stems from 2-3 aspects. Number one is the fact that they see possibly that the Iora itself is not that vibrant, and that has been brought out by various distinguished speakers, and that's why we need to reinvigorate it. So they're seeing a space available to them, and the space that is most conveniently available to them is funding. And it was rightly brought out that funding is sparse in the current Iora structure, and China has deep pockets. Whether its economy is slowed down, but the pockets remain as deep as ever. Some figures, as you all would be aware, this year's trade is close to $1 trillion by China. 2/3 of it goes through the Indian Ocean region. So 2/3 of 1 trillion is not an insignificant figure. The number of billions of goods and even services, if you take the underwater cables going through, is considerable on a daily basis. It also is driven by the fact that the Sagar doctrine, which Ambassador Mudgal mentioned, that also seems to have been a trigger for the commencement of the Indo-Pacific Indian Ocean Forum. And most interestingly is the fact that it is headed by the China International Development Cooperation Agency, the CIDCA. So some observers have seen it as in the past as a competitor to US aid, and US aid has been in the news recently for having been sort of demolished by the Trump-Musk combination, and that's why I'm saying this is giving China more space. And the amount of funding that's available to the CIDCA and the fact that it seems innocuous as a development agency and not as a open government initiative gives it a bit of a camouflage. But in essence, anybody who studies China closely will see that everything is coordinated. So this is in coordination with their maritime strategy, with their Belt and Road Initiative, the subset of which is the Maritime Silk Road in the Indian Ocean region, development of maritime infrastructure, the Global Development Initiative, subsequently to try and more gentler version of the BRI, and all these initiatives combined, this is another prong to strengthen their leadership, because their interests obviously lie in the Indian Ocean region because of the amount of trade. As I mentioned, 2/3 of 1 trillion going through this region, 80% of their oil imports coming from here. So this is another way of trying to strengthen their position here, and they have been very smart in targeting certain countries which require these resources. So what are the suggestions? I've just got 3 suggestions. One, of course, is taking off from what Ambassador Bhatia mentioned, and it was mentioned by earlier speakers also, that there are various focus areas that have been promulgated under the Iora and under the IPOI, Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative by India. I think there is a need to converge them, because if funding is a problem, if effort is a problem, then there is a need to converge them. The focus areas and pillars mentioned by China under the Indian Ocean Forum are largely similar. I mean, if you just to remind everybody, these are sustainable development of the blue economy is the banner headline, and under that is maritime cooperation, marine resources development, biodiversity protection, disaster prevention, and sustainable development of island nations. And it's quite ironic because China is possibly the greatest plunderer of the oceans. So biodiversity protection, etc., is a bit rich. So I think it is important that we converge all these efforts so that we have more resources and brain power and human power available to invest in them. The second is, I think, which once again I think Ambassador Bhatia correctly mentioned, security and the blue economy should be the 2 focus areas, prime focus areas. And here I'm sure Admiral Chauhan, who's here, is the author and the originator of the IONS. I think there needs to be, and maybe he'll mention this, I think there needs to be a formal linkage between IONS and Iora in some manner. And I think that needs to be translated into a greater security partnership. I think this is not difficult to do. Both our organizations are in existence and doing very well. And this could be used as a platform for the security conference that Ambassador Bhatia suggested. So I think this is important. And the last suggestion I have is, having gone to many of these countries, and I still go frequently to Sri Lanka, and I'm going to Mauritius next month, I find that there are requirements to customize solutions. So, we have a broad brush treatment, we have the broad pillars which are fine. We need focus areas and we need these cross-cutting areas, etc. All that is good. But I think we need to focus specifically, because each country has specific issues. Some are common, some are not common. And I think the effectiveness of the organization will really be felt if specific issues in a country are addressed. And I totally agree with what Ambassador Mudgal mentioned, that if these are connected with the coastal communities, and all these countries, particularly the island countries, are entirely coastal communities, then the impact of Iora, the visibility of Iora, and the need to hold it in greater esteem and give it more attention by the member states will grow. And for this, ironically, we come back to the secretariat and the funding. Because unless the secretariat is strong enough or the organization structure is strong enough, I think that is where India, as correctly brought out by Master Bhatia, will have to take the lead. We will have to ensure that we give greater attention in the 2 years of our chairmanship of Iora over the next 2 years. And even if we can, through various resources, if the secretariat cannot be strengthened immediately, even through our diplomatic missions or through specific visits or through specific agencies, outline the problems under these focus areas and the cross-cutting areas that we have, and then find specific solutions, tailor specific solutions for these countries, the effectiveness will be felt. So I think this is something that could help to drive this organization further. And this is extremely important to my mind, because China's expansion and growth into the Indian Ocean is now sort of a foregone conclusion. So it is going to be here. And it is only growing. And obviously, if its presence is here in terms of a growth partner or in terms of providing maritime infrastructure to other countries or training, etc., it is something that you cannot stop. That is inevitable. If the recipient country wants it and the person who is providing is going to provide it, everybody is a sovereign country. But you need to provide a better alternative. And I think that better alternative is already available, but we need to customize and focus it with greater resources and better manpower and more micromanagement of the entire thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Our next speaker is Professor Sanjay Chaturvedi, a scholar in geopolitics at South Asian University, New Delhi. He has expertise in polar and Indian Ocean geopolitics and a lead author for the IPCC 6th Assessment Report. Please welcome, sir.
Thank you very much for these warm words of introduction. Ambassador Bhatia, Ambassador Mudgal, Ambassador Panda, Professor Atri, Professor Mohanty, Admiral Chauhan, Vice Admiral Chawla. I am so honored, Professor Atri. You thought of me and you gave me the opportunity, which is very rare, to be in such a distinguished company. What to say after having listened to those who have always inspired you and from whom you have learned so much over the years. Since you mentioned the term geopolitics, I'm reminded of two major writings in recent times. One, of course, is the Oxfam report, which talks about inequalities and talks about new forms of colonialism. And the second is a book written by Colin Flint called Near Waters and Far Waters, where he makes some very interesting arguments. One thing is very clear: wherever there are inequalities, you create a space for classical geopolitical theories. And that is my sort of opening point. In political geography and geopolitics, we also talk about centrifugal forces that continue to divide a region or a particular kind of regionalism. And the centripetal forces, which unify. I have observed in a very modest way, Indian Ocean region with which I'm in love over the last more than 3 decades, I think. Firstly, as an academic, so this is going to be an academic view. And secondly, as the president of Indian Ocean Research Group, which got an observer status in Yemen, in Sana'a, just before India took over as the chair. And India rejuvenated Iora, Iora as it was called, and we remember we organized a conference at ICWA called Rejuvenating Iora. At a very, very critical juncture, and I think priority areas helped hugely, tremendously. Today, when India takes over as the chair again, I think I was absolutely mesmerized by Ambassador Bhatia's and all these presentations that I have heard today. He talked about the summit level, and I think that is absolute must. But now I think India also needs a narrative. I think there are 2 kinds of interventions in a leadership mode which India needs to make. One is the material intervention, where I think there's a need to address inequalities in the Indian Ocean region in order to insulate it from these interventions of classical geopolitical posturings. China could be one from where such assertions could come. And secondly, I think, is the discursive intervention that India needs to make, where India needs a narrative. Now the question is what that narrative could possibly be. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam is a great philosophy, and I think sometimes we don't understand it the way we should be understanding it, that it is not just about the family is one human family, and as Mr. Mudgil reminded us, it is also about the family of the non-tangibles and tangibles and living human beings and the ecosystems and ecologies. So I think that point is extremely important. What I need to do is what I want to do is, I want to really draw upon a thought piece which I have written recently, which will be published soon by CSDS, which is on the Bharat in Indian Ocean world, reimagining maritime neighborhoods through remembrance. And I think this is where probably India, as it holds the summit level get together of great leaders and great minds, could also remind everyone that in the pre-modern Indian Ocean world, Ambassador Bhatia used it for Iora world, I'm saying Indian Ocean world, India, that is Bharat, was a major anchor, facilitator and translator of series of conversations among overlapping interactive networks comprising polities and communities that were anchored in human cultural geographies of peaceful coexistence. I want to say that these cultural connections and conversations have left behind lasting imprints, inscriptions, inspiring monuments, and memories throughout the Indian Ocean region and its various subregions. Let us recall that the maritime neighborhoods of pre-colonial India evolved in a very deterritorialized spatial format that the modern state-centric cartographies and spatial imaginaries simply cannot capture. That was a fascinating world. These vibrant contact zones extended to Southeast Asia, across the Bay of Bengal, east of the Indian subcontinent, Middle East, East Africa, across their agencies. That has been the beauty and strength of Bharat and its location, right on the rimland, geopolitically speaking, of Eurasia. At the same time, I think we have had this discussion earlier today. There are good reasons to lament, at least I would also lament, that several factors, including national amnesia, overwhelming land-centric geopolitical orientations, and in some ways sea blindness in policy domains, have undermined India's rich maritime heritage. Of course, they have undermined the huge capacity and ability of great Indian Navy from a geostrategic sense, but this has also happened. Some of these unfortunate outcomes, I want to argue, include erosion of the political will and the overall ability to articulate, number one, the maritime dimension of the millennia-old philosophy of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. That is one. Secondly, capitalize on the strategic asset of multi-directional geopolitical orientations that come from India's central location on the Euro-Asian rimland. And thirdly, deepen India's multifaceted engagement with Indo-Pacific, as Ambassador Bhatia reminded us, without diluting Indian Ocean-ness and civilizational cultural moorings in the contemporary era, or what I would like to call grand oceanic imaginations. So let us remember, that is my point, we remember the Indian Ocean world. That remembrance itself can be a great cultural resource as India builds up this narrative for the 21st century. I want to talk very briefly about these, what I would like to describe as Sagar Samvad of the 21st century. And I think this is where Bharat's role and responsibility becomes of paramount importance. Now, the collective Indian oceanic wisdom is more than a valuable resource for state-centric cultural diplomacies. The rich cultural heritage as the regional and global knowledge commons needs to be recalled, rejuvenated, and redeployed to harness the enormous potential of Sagar Samvad that I have written elsewhere as well, was initiated in this historic speech of Prime Minister Modi ji in Mauritius, to which Ambassador Mudgil referred to, where he outlined his Sagar vision, which I argue can be seen as a harbinger of a more global international relations and planetary geopolitics that questions colonial imperial impulses, both old and new, that aim at mastering the ocean while depriving the global south of agency and autonomy. Please let us recall that speech. Describing the Indian Ocean as a common maritime abode, he recalled India's long maritime tradition, cultural footprints, and the cultural labyrinth of Indian diasporas across the ocean,